early days in Montreal, what must it have been like in a country that almost had no culture, that had touring companies coming in all the time?
Yeah.
Very few wasn't Stratford, there wasn't any resident company.
Well, there was the
really.
MRT, the Montreal Repertory Theatre, which was amateur in status, and started by Martha Allen, who was Sir Montague Allen's daughter. She had a lot of money and she'd had a lot of influence, and she began it, she founded it. And she got an awful lot of terrific actors, some of them ex-professional, to come and form the nucleus of a very strong English company. And I started there. Herbie Whittaker directing me, and also Pierre Dagenet, the young French genius of that time. Montreal was already had its own culture because it already had its own French theatre. It had les Compagnons de Saint-Laurent, which was run by Père Legault, Father Legault, who was a priest who had begun this marvelous company, with all sorts of young people. I think there was a young Gratien Gélina in there somewhere, you know, but all the young people who became well known later as French-Canadian stars. Like, I think Jean Gascon worked with them before he had started with Jean-Louis Roux, the Théâtre du Nouveau Monde. So the French already had it. And they also had it professionally because they were professional actors. And radio had begun.
English radio.
And French. French radio was very, very big, and English radio under an old pro called Rupert Kaplan, whom I worked with a lot when I was a kid. And I made quite a sizable living in Montreal from radio in those early days.
And how old were you when you started radio?
I would think about 17 or 18. I had already done Ottawa.
Right.
And then went back to Montreal and did radio.
But did it seem bleak or daunting to think, I actually am going to have a career in the theatre, given how little what was going on?
No, I was determined to do it. I wanted to be a pianist because I play the piano. And then I realized, oh my God, this is ridiculous. This is too much like work. And what a lonely life this is going to be. God almighty. And being an actor you're working with the audience and with people, and you're communicating. The musician's life is rather lonely. You just share the stage with your composer friend who is probably dead. And with the exception of Glenn Gould, of course, who was sort of an actor manqué. So Montreal was a jumping town. It had nightclub, which perhaps was its best theater of all, and which there was almost as many clubs as there were days of the year. And it never closed Montreal. It really, I grew up at a time when Montreal was a swinging city.
And what were the acts in the nightclubs?
Well, oh my God, just nonstop. You could just stay in the Ritz Hotel, for example, and watch Edith. No, Edith Piaf didn't come to the Ritz, but you watch Henri. What was it, Salvador? You'd watch all sorts of nightclub people like Hildegard would come and play the piano. Names that you probably, or most people don't know anymore. The big stars at the time would play at the Ritz. Mabel Mercer, who was one of the really great innovators of original kind of nightclub. She was a black lady with enormous style, and she phrased her songs fantastic. I remember going to see her in New York years later. She had her own little club in New York, and people in the audience, you would have Mel Torme and Frank Sinatra sitting there just watching her, listening to the way she phrased songs. Both of those guys, of course, were extraordinary phrasers of songs, and I think they were influenced a great deal by Mabel Mercer. That sort of class act played at the Ritz.
But there you were heading out into theater,
But
and most
then-
theater was imported. Most theater was touring productions coming
Yes,
along.
and except our little coterie of Montreal. And then you could go, I've got to finish this nightclub thing. I mean, every nightclub in town, Edith Piaf started, came to Montreal. I mean, unbelievable. And then you could go down to downtown Montreal in a place called the Martinique, which was an old nightclub, where Miss Tinguette was playing, aged 83. And I'll never forget her first entrance. She came on. I mean, the place was a raucous bunch of Northerners, you know,